When did you kind of notice the weaponization of mainstream media start to happen?
I mean, it's like you're too close to things, you don't get it at all. I didn't realize how totally corrupt, that there is no ideal at the center of it that in any conceivable way benefits the public's interest, democracy, any of that. Informing the public so they can make informed decisions on who to vote for. Like, that is the last thing from anyone's mind. And it's actually the most corrupt institution in the United States by far. What do I know? It's the only one I've worked in, but I can say it's fundamentally corrupt. Like, there's no non-corrupt part, period. And I realized that, incrementally over time, it's the kind of thing I'm still realizing. I don't consume anything, like, period, anything at all. I don't want it in my head. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't want flattery in my head, and I don't want lies in my head. Of course, they both manage to end up there, but I have a pretty tight screen because I just don't want that. So, it's totally and utterly corrupt. And that's why I'm coming to this late in life, and I'm coming to it cold from working in the institutional media for over 30 years to all of a sudden not in the last year. And so there are a lot of things that are obvious to you and your viewers and that are not obvious to me that I'm just learning. I'm like, wow, I really do feel like the last Chinese soldier, like coming out and being like, the war's over, really? And everyone's like, yeah, it's been 20 years, that's like how I feel. But I'm amazed by podcasts. Talk about it on a likely vector for truth. Podcast? When podcasts first started, I mean, I was not even aware of it, of course, because I'm like such in a different world. But I became over time aware there was things called podcasts, and I was like, well, that's not going to work. Because the one thing we know about information is it's being diced into smaller pieces. And ultimately, TikTok will be our only news source. Like, TikTok didn't exist, but like the idea that like 15 seconds of video would be your source of information, that seemed obvious because that was the trend line. Shorter, faster, shallower, more pictures, fewer words, those trends were really obvious. And they were real. But the idea that people would sit and listen to something for like hours is the opposite of what was happening in my world. And I was like, who would listen to that? Who would ever listen to that? Meanwhile, not only was the media, which is a source of all of our information, degrading and becoming not only more corrupt, but more obviously corrupt, but our educational system was completely collapsed. The humanities collapsed. There's no education, like none. That's not an overstatement. I have a lot of children. They have a lot of friends. I have young people who work for me. No one learns anything in college, like at all. It's only in the humanities. I'm sure electrical engineering is different. Veterinary school is different, but in the sort of broad middle of like, I'm going to take English, history, communications, media study, all this, it's all fake. And so that was happening. And what I didn't perceive is that all of that stuff was moving to podcasts. I guess because I have such a dark and pessimistic temperament, thank you, Scandinavia, I assumed that because the products that people were consuming were getting worse, that people had lost their desire for good products, I guess. I assumed that without thinking of it. But it turned out that, like, no, they were just getting it from a different place. Like, there's a hunger to learn. There's a hunger not to be lied to. People can tell when they don't know exactly what the truth is. I have no idea exactly what the truth is about anything. But I know the direction it's coming from, and I definitely know lying. And there's a natural human desire not to be lied to. And to, like, what is that? To understand things. Curiosity is a human thing. Curiosity died in the media. They're now officially opposed to curiosity. Just asking questions is a crime. In fact, it's my crime, I have noticed. Just asking questions. Oh, what? I will never be embarrassed to ask questions. Like, sorry, you can't make me embarrassed of asking questions.
Yeah.
My motive is irrelevant, by the way. My motive happens to be fairly pure. I am interested. But even if my motive was sinister, it doesn't change the fact of it that answering questions is never bad. Period. Whatever. But as the mainstream media, the big media companies were becoming like just arms of the government and just like full North Korea media landscape. Like no one knows anything. It's all lies. That is where we are. I can say that with great authority, having worked there my whole life. There was this incredible renaissance happening in the most unlikely of mediums, this podcast. and not just about politics, but about history. It's incredible. I mean, there's no way if you go to Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut, where I went, not an impressive place. But even if you go to, I don't know, pick a school, Dartmouth, probably not going to learn that much about legitimate history. You can learn it instantly in podcasts. Millions of people are. You learn about the fall of Rome, 470. What happened? Why did that happen? Or just the details, the Punic Wars. Name it. It's on there.
Yeah.
And then that is the world headquarters of free thinking and honesty. Man, of all the trends, and again, this is right in my world. This is media. That's my world. Of all the trends in the last 30 years, that is the last one I would have predicted and the most hopeful. It's incredible.
How do you like doing it?
Well, I absolutely love it because it's how I grew up.
Do you like it? Do you like podcasting better than?
I've done a total of 2 podcasts in my life. I mean, I've been on, in the last year, I'd never really been on, first of all, I work for a big media company. Mm-hmm. We have our own world of promotions or media relations. I think the last company I worked for called it that, but it's just the PR department, okay? And we have our own way of doing things, and it's a huge company, multi-billion-dollar company, and they have a way of doing it, and all these 28-year-old girls are telling you what you got to do in an interview with New York Times Magazine, whatever. So I'd never done podcasts. That's not even on their radar. They didn't even know that existed, really. They thought Esquire, where I used to write, or New York Times Magazine, they thought that was really impressive. It's not impressive at all. No one reads that crap. No one believes it. The people who do, you don't care about because they're dumb by definition. They read the New York Times and believe it. What? You'd have to be a pretty delusional, low IQ character to be in that position right now. No, I'm serious. I've read a lot for the New York Times. I used to read the New York Times every day, but it's absurd, and everyone knows it's absurd. And if you don't know it's absurd, then I don't care about your opinion. I'm not even going to argue that with you. So I had never done podcasts, really, and I did a hunting podcast in Maine once because I knew the guy or whatever, but I'd never done podcasts. So the last year, I've done all these podcasts, and I loved it. It was so fun. And it was fun because it's exactly how I grew up. This is the most natural thing. This is how I grew up. This is what we did for entertainment. Sit around the table and talk about what you think and what you've read and be as honest as you can be. One of the, I hate to say this, I guess I'm not allowed to say this, but one of the beauties of growing up, as a young child with no women in the house, you can say whatever you want. There's no one to offend. You know what I mean? It's how I grew up. So you say whatever you want and you can be as honest as you want. There's just dudes, it's what are you going to offend your dad? No, probably not. What hasn't he seen? Are you going to offend your little brother? Who cares? You can just really be honest. And I love that. It's the happiest times of my life. And our family is that way. And we have exceedingly long dinners. We play games at the end. It's just fun. And everyone can say exactly what they think. I've always lived that way at home. So a podcast is not different from that. Really. Yeah. And so I've done 2 episodes. So it took me, I'm very much a non-genius. So it takes me a while to figure out the obvious. And after a year of doing cable news interviews on the internet, which did fine, it's fun. I like interviewing people. It finally occurred to me the most fun I've had in the last year. I've done 2 things that I really enjoyed since getting fired. One was being able to travel around to different countries and interview people there. I couldn't do that because I was stuck in a studio every night. I really love that, so I want to keep doing that, and I am. And the second thing I've really enjoyed is going on other people's podcasts. I just enjoyed it. It's just fun. And why is that not fun? It's fun. And why don't I do that? And why don't I do it at my actual dining room table in my barn, where my son's engagement party was, or where my family actually eat? Why not do that? And I've had a makeup artist my whole life, as I told you, and that's a little embarrassing to admit that. I used to tell my kids, your dad wears makeup when they were little, but why do that? I probably should be ashamed of how I look, but I'm actually not really. I'm married to the same girl. I don't really care. And so why not just do exactly what I would do anyway? And we don't have TV at our house, and we don't go to the movies, or we don't, our entertainment is meals. That's always been our entertainment, always. And we take them really seriously. Always have people over for dinner. We always have 10, 12 people at the table. It's not super exciting, but for us, that's our entertainment. That's what we do. And that's what we've always done. or since the week we were married, we've done that. And that's, as I've noted, exactly how I grew up. So why not just do that? Like, why is that not great?
It is great.
Yeah, well, I've only done it twice. Okay. I interviewed Aaron Rodgers, who I loved. He's just a really good guy. And I interviewed a friend of mine called Dave Smith, who's a comedian, but kind of a really smart guy, who has the same instincts I have about a lot of things. And I've just done 2, and I have loved it. And I'm doing 3 a week for the foreseeable future. And why not?
Incredible.
Well, don't you think? I mean, I don't always, but I usually get to the obvious conclusion last. I start with like, let's do something really elaborate and unlikely and probably certain to fail. And then like over time, you're like, probably didn't need to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
I think that about the last thing I'll say. I can't stop talking. That's one of my main faults. But I always think that you see these numbers and like no one's dating, much less getting married, much less having kids. And like men and women don't understand each other. It's all real. It's like the central tragedy of our time. But I always think it's kind of not that hard. Like, does she smell good? Is she nice? Does she have a cute butt? In your opinion, this is a very subjective question. Do you find her attractive? Probably just like if she's a decent person, you probably just marry her and make the commitment and try hard and conceive a bunch of kids. That's actually not that hard either, having done it. And like, it's just not hard. It's like animals do this and they're like pretty happy. So just like take that route. Don't overthink it. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yep, I do. A little bit ago, you were talking about all the lies.
Yeah.
That we had, I mean, with COVID, the media.
Yeah.
Iraq. I mean, Iraq alone, and I've heard you talk about 9/11 a little bit. I'd love to dive in on that, but with Building 7. But I mean, even Iraq, I mean, I was all about it when we were there. I thought we were there for the right reasons. I think the whole country thought, at least at the beginning, that we were there for the right reasons. And then, I mean, I wasn't a big picture guy. I was a hit this target right in front of you guy. And now looking back and seeing Cheney's ties to Halliburton and for those that don't know, Halliburton was the biggest logistics it was the only logistics company to my knowledge that was, I mean, they built the barracks, they built the chow halls, they cooked the food, they cleaned the shitters, they supplied the shitters, they did vehicle fuel, they did the laundry, they did every logistical thing you can possibly imagine. They basically built an entire city's infrastructure out. And when you look at that, when you look back at that, and nothing was really accomplished there other than pulling Saddam out, then you start looking at 9/11, which could have been prevented. And what isn't a fucking lie?
Well, I would say from, the summer of 1914 until present, really the modern era, the beginning of the First World War till now, most of the big perceptions that we have about that are wrong at every sort of stage. So I don't know the answer to most of the questions.
Where I'm going with this, I mean, I just interviewed this guy. He is an Afghan resistance fighter.
Yeah. And
I brought him on, and he is telling us, and this has been confirmed by another CIA targeter, which is going to be confirmed. It's leading down the whole rabbit hole of interviews. We're now giving the Taliban $40 million a week. Did you know that?
I'm not surprised at all.
$40 million a week. We spent 20 plus years fighting over there, the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, and now, just on the drop of a hat, $40 million a week, which we'll find out in a later interview, it's actually upwards of $87 million a week.
Yeah, I mean, it's
everything has been a fucking lie.
Yeah, It's endless, and I mean, I have thoughts about every single thing you said. I mean, I guess the most obvious response is, well, let's start declassifying some documents. And why are there any 9/11? I mean, what was that actually? And I don't know the answer. I have a lot of theories about it. I was not fighting any wars, of course. I was just a journalist, but I was definitely I was paying close attention in Washington and in various locations around the world to how that unfolded at the time. And but why in the world would any 9/11 document remain classified?
Yeah.
And thousands are. And the fact that they are has stymied a series of lawsuits by the families of people who killed on 9/11 against the Saudi government. Now, whether those suits are justified or not, I have no idea. But I really don't know what I think about all of that. I suspect there's a lot of lying there too. But what's the possible rationale in keeping any of that classified? And the truth is, and this is true in our private lives as well as in our country's life, secrecy abets dishonesty, of course. It's like, I don't want my wife to see my phone. Why? Why? You know what I mean? A buddy of mine once said to me, have you heard of Life 360? And I was like, yeah, the thing where all your family members, he goes, yeah, my wife tried to get me on that. No fucking way. And I was like, why? Well, it's just no one's business. It's an invasion of privacy. I started laughing. We were in a hunting trip. I started laughing. I said, wow, you're... And by the way, I love privacy. I do. I think privacy is a prerequisite to humanity. Like, if no privacy, you can't be human. I believe in privacy. However, secrecy is a slightly different thing and a sinister thing, actually. Why in a democracy would we have big secrets? Particularly decades down the road or 80 years down the road, or in the case of the Kennedy assassination, 61 years down the road. Well, of course, the only reason is to keep misdeeds hidden. That's the only reason, period. It's not sources and methods, sorry.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's just declassify it and find out. And of course, that'll never happen because there is deception at the heart of that. Now, I don't know exactly why. I have some thoughts on it, but I don't know if they're true or not, so I'm not going to articulate them. But, there's definitely still a lot of lying about that. And people sense it. And whether they're right in their specific theories or not, I can't say. But they're right to be very suspicious of 9/11, absolutely. And we can prove that because there are many thousands of documents still classified. That is proof that there's something amiss, that there's lying, period. It's true of the Kennedy assassination. It's true of everything that remains hidden from us. What could possibly be the pretext for hiding what our government is doing if it is in fact our government? If this is an exercise in self-government, if this is whatever you want to call it, constitutional republic, democracy, whatever, if the people rule, what possible justification could you have from hiding something from me? Because it's my government. Well, of course, the answer is because it's not your government. It belongs to the people who run it. The organization exists for its own sake, not for yours. You just pay for it. And that kind of justifies revolution right there. Now, I'm not rooting for revolution, don't want one. A lot of people will die. I don't know if it'll work. They rarely improve anything. They leave lasting scars. I'm very anti-revolution. However, as an academic matter, you have the groundwork for one because the system itself is based on a lie. And the lie is that the government serves the people. And that, of course, is not true. It oppresses the people and uses them as cannon fodder and as bank accounts for its own sake. And that's not a system that can continue very long because it's fundamentally rotten.